Major breaking news. Anti-gun groups in the United States are now complaining that the effect of Donald Trump's policy is infringing upon their ability to advance their agenda. Indeed, let's break it down and talk about it when we come back. Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the Four Boxes Diner, proud American gun owner, constitutional attorney, member of the United States Supreme Court Bar, and I'm proud to say the top voice of the Second Amendment in America. Thank you, 2025 Gundies Awards. All right, so remember how I've explained to you that when you look at the Trump administration, what they're doing, there's a lot they're doing. Sometimes what they do is not apparently directly, I should say, touching fingers with our right to keep and bear arms, but the ripple effect is very good for the Second Amendment and the right to keep and bear arms, and sometimes the dots have to be connected. Obviously, President Trump has not even been in office 100 days. There's a lot of work that's being done on all fronts, all of which, in my view, advance the right to keep and bear arms in one form or another. And that can be proven today. Specifically, two of the major gun control groups in the United States, the Brady Center for Prevention of Gun Violence, or whatever they're now called, but the Brady Center, and the Giffords Law Center have just filed alongside other non-governmental agencies, which used to be called nonprofits, I guess, but whatever they all call it, NGOs or whatever now. They have filed an amicus brief in some of the cases involving challenges to Donald Trump's orders that are basically saying that certain law firms are going to be denied the ability to have top secret clearance going forward on the grounds that, for whatever the argument is, can't be trusted or whatever it is. We don't need to get into the details of those Trump orders for the purposes of this video. The point is that this attempt to get some of these large law firms, big law, which I'm quite familiar with, to basically stop being left-wing activists, as I see it, is starting to take effect and actually mattering to, among other things, our Second Amendment rights. Remember a couple weeks ago, I did a video on the New York-based law firm of Paul Weiss about how I think their equity partners make, on average, in terms of profits per partner, somewhere in the order of magnitude of $7 million to $7.5 million a year. That's profits per equity partner. And I think their first-year associates, meaning somebody fresh out of law school at the age of 24, whatever it was when I started, would be making today somewhere in the order of magnitude, I think $225,000 right out of law school before any bonuses, for example. So these are very wealthy organizations. These big law firms make tons of money. They really do. Now, I've always found it a little perplexing, these large law firms doing work on behalf of governments, on behalf of government laws. Because in my experience when I was a junior lawyer, usually if we did pro bono, we would be working with impoverished people, people that didn't have the resources to put on some fight against some big agency or something like that. So usually they would be in civil rights. So they would basically we'd be representing individuals, let's say, against big organizations or the power of government or something like that to make the playing field more even. So it's always been perplexing to me how we see these massive law firms providing, in many instances, as best I can tell, pro bono services for organizations that are supporting government laws that infringe upon liberties. You would think that if you're suing the government, whether it be a state government like New York or the federal government and the state government have ample resources to defend their own laws. I mean, they have the power to tax, and if you don't pay the tax, you get to go to prison. So they're able to raise lots and lots and lots of money. And the federal government, in addition to raising money through taxing us, can also raise money through the printing of the money, which ultimately comes back in a form of an inflation tax where we pay higher prices because of the monetary policy to pay the government's bills. So ultimately it's a tax as well through inflation. Now, I only bring this up because there is now a brief that was just filed by about 24 nonprofits, including the Giffords Law Center and Brady, arguing that Donald Trump's efforts at dealing and going after some of these law firms is going to negatively impact their ability to file pro bono amicus briefs or otherwise get support to defend gun control laws in America. Here is a quote by Brady President Chris Brown on this very topic. By targeting these law firms, President Trump is trying to silence groups that he does not agree with through intimidation and retribution. Nonprofits like Brady that rely on these firms to defend life-saving gun laws and hold negligent gun industry actors accountable will suffer the consequences. as will everyday Americans whose livelihoods are under threat by our nation's gun violence crisis. This affront to our First Amendment rights and attack on our access to counsel, listen here, hear that, access to counsel, continues the administration's descent into autocratic tendencies and is part of a broad ongoing attack on efforts to reduce gun violence, including the erasing of data and science on gun violence and rescission of life-saving gun violence prevention policies. That is why Brady joins 24 nonprofits in urging the court to safeguard Perkins Coie, Jenner and Block, Wilmer Cutler Pickering Hale, and Dorr, and firms like them. So there you have it. And this, of course, is in addition to the various quotes from like the Giffords Foundation. So the point is that this is an example of how a Donald Trump policy that on its face does not appear to assist the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms does indeed do so. Because as we've covered before, the law firm of Paul Weiss, as I illustrated in a prior video, I think I counted somewhere between 5 to 7 different major amicus briefs submitted on behalf of gun control efforts, whether it be in, I think, the Sandy Hook cases or Bruin and so on. So if you start turning to these hugely successful, hugely wealthy law firms and basically start cutting back on their ability to do nonprofit, I should say pro bono work for nonprofits, advancing the left-wing cause, well, obviously there's a huge ripple effect. Now, in contrast, as you know, getting these major law firms to do work in support of the Second Amendment, as best I can tell, is virtually impossible because I'm pretty much tied into this world. And I can assure you, as far as I'm aware, I can't recall any huge major law firm doing pro bono work as a general matter for the right to keep and bear arms. If anything, it's always on the other side, which I find to be, frankly, incredible because, again, if you think about it, it's if you like the cases we cover on this channel, you've got some small gun shop, you got like 5 gun owners, somewhere in a blue state with like limited resources and like 3 lawyers if they're lucky working for them on a discounted rate or something like that, or pro bono or something like this, and they're like litigating against the state of New York or the state of California. I mean, compare the budgets of the California Rifle and Pistol Association, just as an example. Compare their budget on an annual basis with the budget of the Department of Justice of the United States, and then compare their budget with the Department of Justice, or whatever it's called out there, for the state of California, right? Compare any of the budgets of these sort of Second Amendment organizations. It could be Second Amendment Foundation, could be Gun Owners of America, right? Could even be the NRA. Compare these annual budgets of these organizations in total, and then compare it to the budgets of like the Justice Department for the state of Oregon, the Justice Department for the state of Washington, the Justice Department for the state of Colorado, and so on and so on. So it seems to me, if there's pro bono work to be had by these major law firms, they, in my opinion, should be standing up for the little person, for the person that can't afford pro bono representation, for the person that's on the tough side of the fight. Having these law firms do pro bono work to advance gun control, which is really a version of anti-civil rights as I see it, that's my view, you're really lining up with the largest powerful actors on the planet. The federal government, not necessarily under Trump, that's going to get fixed. We'll see, one step at a time. But up to now, lining up against the federal government and all these justice departments for all these massive states like New York. And yet now you pile on and support the government with pro bono services on behalf of nonprofits that are supporting the government against individuals. So it does seem a little odd to me that if you're going to do pro bono work as a major law firm, why are you doing it on behalf of a government that has infinite resources, as opposed to defending the little person, the person with no resource, the person with limited resources? But again, you can disagree with me. Let me know if you disagree with me in the comments below. But again, I'm not taking particular positions on these lawsuits involving Donald Trump's decision, because at the end of the day, he's the commander-in-chief and gets to decide who has access to classified information, who does not. Okay? So if there's some reason why he thinks a particular group of people or a particular person, whether they were a lawyer or not, should not have access to classified information, it seems to me at the end of the commander-in-chief has that ability to make that choice. right? Because all classified information derives ultimately from the commander-in-chief, and no one can restrict that because he's the commander-in-chief. And if you try to restrict that, I think you're infringing upon his powers under Article 2 of the United States Constitution, which is what we've talked about before in the context of that Jack Smith nonsense Florida case over classified documents where Donald Trump had the full authority on his own as the executive to declassify anything he wanted. Period, full stop. But again, today, if he feels that there's a certain group of actors or people, whatever it is, cannot be trusted with this information, then it seems to me that he has a basis for denying them access to that. But again, I understand there's arguments on the other side about whether or not this sort of targeted action, if it can be demonstrated that they're targeting a person or group because of their political views, that could run afoul of the First Amendment. But if there's other reasons for denying it, well, then there may be an objective basis, a neutral basis for taking away their rights. But again, this is ultimately for the courts to decide. The only point of this video is this. I just want you to understand that this is a classic example where you're going to read stuff in the paper that talks about, let's say, Donald Trump acting in a particular way in a particular topic, and people may turn around the very next minute and say, why is Donald Trump not doing more for the Second Amendment? Why is Donald Trump not doing enough to protect individual freedoms and individual rights and the right to keep and bear arms? But here's an example, yet another example of the many we've covered already, of Donald Trump's policies having a positive impact potentially on the right to keep and bear arms. Because again, as we saw with some of these games with USAID and some of these other things, one does wonder, on a separate note, separate and apart from this issue of allegedly targeting law firms, one does wonder to what degree the American taxpayer through the USAID has been effectively funding gun control efforts across the country and across the globe. But again, that's a topic of a different video. The point of this video is to understand that even when Donald Trump does not do something specific for the Second Amendment, the ripple effect, the consequence of that may ultimately come back and help the Second Amendment, such as closing the border from illegal aliens breaking into America and voting us into obscurity and oblivion. So there you have it, folks. Hope you learned a little bit something here today. I'll put links to some information about the position that Giffords and Brady has taken, including I'll try to put their amicus brief down below. I'll link to it in case you want to find out more about this issue. And again, I appreciate you tuning in. Make sure you follow me on X at 4boxofdiner. Don't forget to subscribe both YouTube and Rumble. And I look forward to talking to you again real soon here at the 4 Box of Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.